All right, let's go over this chapter 23, abdominal, hematological, gynecological, genitourinary, and renal emergencies. We will probably break these lessons up, and we are probably going to review the abdominal anatomy. Here's our slide. So the liver lives in the upper right quadrant. It usually filters out the blood. It also creates a lot of different proteins and molecules for clotting. It stores sugar for us as a form of glycogen, and there's a lot of blood supply to the liver. It also underneath the liver is also a smaller sac called the gallbladder. You see that in green up there. It stores some of the bile salts that the liver produces. This will be expelled into the stomach for aiding digestion. So that's the gallbladder. From the gallbladder, there is a pathway or a set of conduits that lead down into the stomach. It's called the common bile duct, as it tends to share this conduit with the pancreas, and the pancreas is just underneath the stomach, as you see on the left side, that more fair light tan colored pancreas. It sits right behind the stomach, so they've removed the stomach. So from the gallbladder we move into the common bile duct that empties into the small intestine, to the stomach, near the small intestine, the duodenum. The pancreas is just behind the stomach. It also shares a pathway with the common bile duct and excretes its chemicals to aid in digestion. Remember that the pancreas is also function is to provide several hormones in metabolism. That's the utilization and storage of sugar, that's insulin and glucagon. Now, as we go back to the stomach now, the stomach starts with the esophagus that comes from the mouth and down into the top of the stomach, and then the contents then empty into the small intestines. We see the duodenum, the jejunum, and then the ileum. And that small intestine just kind of waves around. Down in the right lower quadrant area, we would have the appendix. It's not visually shown here, but then the more cherry colored large intestine, we can see as it ascends on the right side, it goes right under the liver and transversely crosses across the abdomen, just under the stomach. And then we have the descending colon, and it empties back out into the rectum. The stomach is for aided digestion. It's highly acid contents, tends to help us break down and denature the food molecules that we eat. The digestive juices and enzymes that are poured into the smaller intestine in the duodenum aids for reabsorption and allows the bloodstream to take up this nutrients without having the high acid content. It then continues through the small intestines and the mesenteric arteries, which are not shown here. As I said, it then empties into the large intestines, where mostly the water is reabsorbed, and the digestive contents then become more fecal material, and then is excreted through the rectum. Other organs that we haven't talked about yet are in the retroperitoneal area in the back. We can see that there are two kidneys. What's not shown is the adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney. But let's pay attention to the kidney itself. It's supposed to filter out, again, the blood, and it's highly vascular and has a lot of blood supply to this. When the blood pressure is high and there's a lot of volume within the circulatory system, the kidney can pay close attention to that by ridding the fluid and causing or the increase in the production of urine. If the blood pressure and the circulatory volume is low, then the kidneys will then retain fluid and keep the fluid from becoming or produced into urine, and it maintains that volume within the body system. Any urine that's produced is then collected through the collecting tubules and then down through what we call these urine tubes or ureters, and then it'll then empty, as we can see on the other side where the bladder is, kind of mid-pubic, midline. This bladder fills up with urine and then empties out through the urethra. Okay. Now, it's important that we understand the process and the anatomy and physiology of the abdominal cavity. Here we're showing us the different regions and how we would scan and then palpate. On one side we show a 4-quadrant scan: the right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, the left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant. Then on the other side, it breaks it up into more smaller parcels or parsecs so that we can get more specific. As you see, we have the right and left hypochondral region. This is just under the rib cage now. This is not, has nothing to do with the ribs, but just kind of like right under the rib cage. Then we have the epigastric region, is just about where the xiphoid process would be, where the rib cages meet in the midline. We have lumbar region, which is now more of the mid-abdomen periumbilical area. And then we have the right iliac region. This is more of the pubic area, but around the iliac groin. And then the hypogastric region is in that pubic area. So we're gonna stop here, and we're gonna be looking at these areas in the abdomen. So after I explain this, we'll then talk about the different types of medical emergencies. So that appendix we talked about, it's in the right lower quadrant. It is an outpouching. It's where the large intestine and the small intestine meet in that right lower quadrant. Sometimes they can get inflamed. On the bladder, we know that it collects the urine, and the urine is formed and then sent down through the ureters from the right and left kidney and then stored in the bladder. The common bile duct, we know that this comes from the gallbladder, and then it marries its conduct way all the way down to where it meets up with the small intestine, duodenum, and where it intersects with the pancreas. Fallopian tubes, which weren't shown on that slide, are female reproductive organs. These come off the uterus on the right and left suprapubic region, and they are there to scoop up the oocytes off the ovaries during times of follicular development and maturation. We talked about the gallbladder, which is attached to the common bile duct. It stores our bile and bile salts that aid in digestion. The intestines, there are large and small intestines. Our large intestines are the ones that reabsorb the liquid and the water, and then the fecal material is developed and excreted through the rectum. The small intestines are where we have most of our absorption of nutrients that enter in the bloodstream through the mesenteric. The stomach itself is a highly acidic area. It tends to churn and continues to break down the products of our consumption. The uterus, again, as part of the female reproductive organ, we know that the fallopian tube attaches to the top of the uterus. The uterus is a very vascular organ. It's hollow. It's where the oocyte and the spermatocyte, if they are fertilized together, would mature and implant within the uterus, and that's where we would have embryo to fetal development. The ureters are the two conduits that come off the kidney that empty into the bladder. The kidney, the liver, the ovaries, pancreas, and spleen, these are all solid organs. The kidneys are responsible, again, of maintaining water and pH. So if the circulatory system has too much, it will push it out. If the circulatory system has too little, it will retain fluid to maintain blood pressure. It also maintains the pH, keeping the body in homeostasis. The liver, again, is it stores, it creates, it helps with clotting, sugar metabolism, digestion, and filtering out a lot of the blood itself, where it gets rid of all of the waste products. The ovaries are where the oocytes develop, part of the female reproductive organs. The pancreas has exocrine and endocrine. Exocrine is the the digestive juices. Endocrine is where it uses for our diabetics and metabolism, so insulin and glucagon. And then the spleen is another solid organ. It's where our red blood cells are reabsorbed. It's also where the white blood cells sort of help. It's an organ that helps with our immunity and first line defenses for infection. These other major vessels, we have the abdominal aorta, which branches off the arch of the aorta, which comes off the top of the heart, then through the thoracic cage. So the abdominal aorta then feeds blood out to different organs, such as the mesentery, the kidneys, the stomach, vice versa. And as it all goes down and bifurcates at the iliacs and then down to the femoral, blood returns back to the heart through the inferior vena cava. And we know that this comes back in inferiorly into the right atrial.